Okay, this is Dave for the Shepherd School, and we're going to talk about Kydex a little bit, and specifically some poor man's Kydex. On the table you see a bunch of kitchen knives, and you see some pretty ugly homemade sheaths. Something I've always wanted to do is learn to form Kydex. Kydex is just a proprietary name of a thermoplastic blend that you can buy in sheets. It's about generally about 1 foot by 2 foot. It's going to run you about $20 or so. Well, you heat it up, put it in the oven, or use a heat gun, and it becomes flexible, and then you can mold it. Now, being a non-handy type of guy that tries to experiment a little bit, I don't want to waste a lot of money and buy some Kydex until I know what I'm doing. So I did a little bit of research on the internet, and I found that sometimes you can use other thermoplastics. Now, it's important that you're careful what you use, because some stuff like PVC, you can heat it and mold it, but the fumes have toxins in them and can cause you permanent damage. But I have found that milk jugs work pretty good, as well as jugs from dishwasher detergent. Now, whichever plastic that you use, you want to make sure that you do it in a well-ventilated area, and if it's off-gassing or put off any fumes, stop, quit heating it, and get rid of it. But anyway, before we get into how to, let me just show you some of these knife sheaths. Now, these are my very first attempt, and used a heat gun, which I'm not really used to using either, so they're a little ugly. My best one, pretty smooth. My best one, this was a dishwashing detergent bottle, and because it's thicker, it was a lot easier to heat until it became soft. These milk jugs, they form pretty good, but because they're thinner, you couldn't put these in an oven. You'd have to use a heat gun. And what I did is I just heated them up until they were clear, and then folded them around. Both the milk jugs and the soap cans, I was able to basically weld them, heat them up enough where I was able to mash the plastic together and form it together, so I didn't have to use rivets like you would with Kydex. But because they were thinner and they're kind of DIY, alternatives, they didn't come off as smooth as a formal Kydex sheath. Okay, we're going to do some more of that DIY poor man's Kydex with a milk jug. We'll start with. Trying to cut this. Trying to cut this where I maximize the flat portions without cutting my hand off with the shears, because I'm in a hurry trying to save tape. Okay, got a flat piece. Got the knife. Like I said, we've already made us some Kydex ulcers, so we're just going to kind of show you the process. Okay. If this was for real, obviously I would make the piece of Kydex bigger, but we're just kind of showing you what we're doing. Take the heat gun. Unfortunately, this heat gun, if I put it up on high, it has a tendency to flip the breaker down here in the workbench. And I'm wanting to heat it evenly. A toaster oven would be a pretty good thing to use for Kydex, but I don't know how it would work with a milk jug since they're so thin. Just fold that over. And you want to leave a little bit on your actual grip. And then you just shut your mold up, put a weight on it or whatever. Which luckily got a bunch of Lee 12 gauge slugs that I cast the other day. So we're going to let that sit and cool, and then we'll pull it out. Now with the milk jug, because we use the heat gun, we may have to spot heat and change stuff around a little bit. We'll come back when this cools down. Okay. You'll see that it's molded to it. Okay. Now what I can do is heat it until this becomes clear and it'll actually fuse together. We'll do that just so you can see. Now if you do this too much and then you move it, you've made it molten, and you'll end up pulling the Kydex off and make a little hole. Do that. Basically you push that together. And when it cools, it'll make one piece. Just like putty. Then when it dries, when it dries, because this is so thin, you could probably use scissors, and you just cut it how you want it, but you want to make sure that you leave, you know, a 1/4 inch or so off of the blade for it to be stuck together. Now, like I said, this is just a proof of concept, just to kind of show you, since we already made some. Even though this one turned out a lot better after making 4 or 5 of them, I wish I'd have used a bigger piece, because this one turned out to be a lot prettier. Because I heated it up just once and then put it straight to the press, it came out a lot less wavy than some of the others. So, we've done milk jug. Let's do a dishwashing detergent container. Now a lot of this sticker is going to come off with the heat of the heat gun. But if I was going to do this for an actual knife holster, like say I was going to make a neck knife or something, I would take it completely off. But since we're just showing you how this is done, we're not going to worry about it too terribly much. So we've got our piece of plastic. Lay it down and heat it up till it's floppy. You'll see it move just a little bit. And I want to get it evenly heated. This is where an oven would work, or a toaster oven would work probably better. if I just heated one area and turned it into putty, I could use it to spot weld like we did the milk jug. But I don't want to do that. I want to keep it flexible so that I can fold the whole thing around the knife, and you'll see it starting to lay flat. See how it's starting to get floppy? Alright, I'm thinking this is pretty good. Take it out, put the knife on there. Maybe not. Fold it over. Put it in the press. This one's going to be reheated, I can already tell you. We're going to let that sit, cool down, and then we're going to reheat it by doing it in stages. It'll make it a little easier to get a good tight crease. Okay, this after we pulled that knife out of the press. You can see some of it took the bend and some of it didn't. So we're going to reheat it and kind of clamp it and get a little bit here around the grip. I'm not trying to melt it, just soften it up a little bit. What's a shame is that because of stereotyping, most all of your containers for your dishwashing detergent or your laundry soap are going to be nice and pretty pink or red. It's going to be hard to get a, you know, a brown or whatever if you want a natural tone. But like I said, you do this until you're comfortable with the technique, and then you can start actually buying some Kydex. You can get Kydex in all sorts of colors. But I don't want to waste all my money on material that I'm going to use up in experiments until I get the technique down. And I found after doing this for 4 or 5 little knife sheaths, I'm getting a little bit better. Okay. Alright, let's take this thing out and look at it. You can see it kind of bent to it. Now what we're going to do now is just trim it. When you're messing with Kydex, you usually use a Dremel tool or a grinder. For here. Okay. Last we're going to do is we're going to heat this up and basically weld the edges shut. And then this one will be done. Better use gloves. This stuff will melt to your hands. It's kind of sticking a little bit to my gloves. Now, if I'd have took the paper off, took the time to do that, it'd melt a lot easier. Be a little higher quality, but like I said, we're just showing you that it can be done. You really ought to try this on your own if you think you're gonna. Start working with Kydex at all. If you really want to see how this is done, Atwood of Atwood Knives has got a pretty cool video of him making some holsters. He actually is good at this though. Okay. Now, once that seals up, we'll trim off the edges and we'll be done. But you can see how it works basically. So until next time, you can always follow us online at tngun.com. Thanks. If you think this is interesting, I'll tell you, there's a website called Lindsay Books, and I don't know the address off the top of my head. But if you just Google or search engine Lindsay Books, the guy specializes in old technical manuals, old how-to stuff. And one of the things that he sells is a book on how to make an injection molder, where you can cut up this plastic into strips and melt it and use it to cast things like, like knobs off of your stove or whatever.